Do you think you can refuse, Ava? I won't marry a blind person, but you will. Go out there, play my role, and don't mess it up. Ava opened her mouth, but her throat was dry. A terrible secret weighed heavily on her chest. Before we begin, let us know where you're listening to the story from: Los Angeles, New York, or somewhere else in the world. And when it's over, don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10. Let's get started. The organ's deep sounds resonated, like a whisper from the ancient stone walls of St. Patrick's Church. The light from the stained glass painted rainbow patterns on the marble floor, where hundreds of eyes were focused on the main aisle. The scent of lilies and beeswax candles blended, creating an atmosphere that was both solemn and suffocating. The murmur of the guests, in expensive suits and evening gowns, filled the space. But everything suddenly fell silent when the heavy wooden doors creaked open. Ava Sullivan stepped out, a pure white wedding dress hugging her slender figure. But her hands trembled, gripping the bouquet as if it were a lifeline. Her high heels clicked unevenly on the floor, like her heart was beating erratically. She dared not look up, dared not meet the face of the man waiting at the end of the aisle. Alexander Thornton, a blind millionaire CEO, whom she had only met hours before. In the dressing room, her stepmother Eleanor's voice still echoed in her mind, cold as a blade. If you refuse, your grandmother's nursing home will have no money. Do you want Grandma Margaret to live on the street, Ava? Those words, along with the scornful gaze of her sister Chloe, had pushed Ava into this dress, into the role of Chloe Sullivan, the bride that Alex had agreed to marry to merge two corporations. But Chloe, with her golden hair and charming smile, had flatly refused when she learned Alex was blind. "I'm not marrying a cripple," she had screamed, leading the Sullivan family to swap brides, making Ava a pawn in a power game. Ava walked slowly, her breath heavy, as if each step was an act of convincing herself not to run away. The crowd murmured, curious eyes sweeping over her, but she only heard her heart pounding. At the end of the aisle, Alex stood straight, his black suit fitting snugly, sunglasses concealing lifeless eyes. He tilted his head slightly, as if listening, not to the organ, but to her footsteps. His assistant Luke, standing beside him, gently touched his shoulder, whispering something. Alex nodded, a faint smile on his lips. As Ava approached, the lily bouquet slipped from her trembling fingers, crashing to the floor. The crowd gasped softly, a few giggles arose. Panic-stricken, she quickly bent down to pick it up, but her long wedding dress hindered her, nearly causing her to trip. Her face burned hot, her heart pounded as if it would burst. "Oh no, not now," she mumbled, her voice barely audible even to herself. "It seems my bride is clumsier than I expected." Alex's voice echoed, deep and smooth as velvet, with a hint of teasing. The crowd chuckled lightly, but Ava felt a jolt run down her spine. She looked up, catching the faint smile on his lips. He couldn't see her, but why did she feel as though he was looking right through her? "I'm sorry," Ava muttered, her voice wavering. She quickly stood up straight, the crumpled bouquet in her hands. Luke stepped forward, picking up the fallen petals, handing them back to her with a reassuring look. Ava tried to breathe deeply, but her heart still pounded out of control. "It's okay," Alex said, his voice gentle but with a hint of sharpness, as if testing her. "Are you okay, Chloe?" The name Chloe was like a stab in Ava's chest. She swallowed dryly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes, I'm fine," she replied, but the sound that came out was weak, like a whisper carried away by the wind. Alex tilted his head, the smile on his lips deepened, but he said nothing more. The priest began the sermon, his voice echoing in the vast space. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Alexander Thornton and Chloe Sullivan." Ava stood there, feeling like the world was shrinking. only leaving the organ's sound, the priest's voice, and Alex's breath beside her. She glanced at him, searching for signs of suspicion, but his face was calm, his hands clasped tightly in front. When the priest asked, "Chloe Sullivan, do you agree to take Alexander Thornton as your lawful husband, in love and responsibility, until death do us part?" Ava felt her throat dry. She glanced toward the front row, where Eleanor sat, her eyes like daggers. Beside her, Chloe, in a pink gown, smirked. Ava hesitated, her voice breaking. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to continue. "I do." The crowd clapped, but Alex did not. He stood still, head slightly tilted, as if listening for something in her voice. "You're trembling," he said softly, enough for only her to hear. "Are you afraid of me, Chloe?" Ava froze, not daring to answer. Her heart pounded wildly, as if trying to break free from her chest. He couldn't see her. But why did she feel as though he could see through every secret? The organ rose, marking the moment the wedding rings were exchanged. Luke handed the ring to Alex, and he took Ava's hand, slipping the ring onto her finger. His hand was cold, but his touch was sure, as if he knew exactly where her finger was. "You have soft hands," he said, his voice deep. "Not what I remember." Ava swallowed dryly, not daring to respond. The crowd clapped again, the applause like crashing waves, drowning her in the truth. She had just become the wife of a man she didn't know, in a play she didn't want to perform. When the priest declared them husband and wife, Alex turned to her, sunglasses hiding his eyes, but his smile carrying an unreadable expression. "Welcome to my world, Chloe," he said, his voice both gentle and mysterious. Ava smiled weakly, but inside her, a question gnawed deeply. Why does he call out Chloe's name as if he knows it's not her? The clinking of champagne glasses rang out like discordant notes in the party hall of a Hollywood Hills mansion. The dazzling crystal chandelier lights reflected off the shimmering evening gowns and sleek black suits. The scent of expensive perfume blended with fresh roses, creating a luxurious yet suffocating atmosphere. Ava Sullivan stood in the corner, her pristine wedding dress now feeling as heavy as armor. She clutched her wine glass tightly, trying to maintain a forced smile, but her eyes kept scanning the crowd, looking for her stepmother Eleanor and her sister Chloe. Just a few minutes earlier, in St. Patrick's Church, her newlywed husband, the blind millionaire CEO Alexander Thornton, had called out Chloe with a mysterious smile, as if he knew she was not the real bride. Those words still echoed in Ava's mind, making her heart pound. He couldn't see her, but why did every word he said seem like a dagger piercing her secret? "Ava!" Eleanor's voice interrupted her thoughts, sharp as a knife. Her stepmother emerged from the crowd, wearing a glimmering emerald green dress, her piercing eyes sweeping over Ava from head to toe. "Have you forgotten you're supposed to be Chloe? Stop standing here like a broken doll. Go over there, talk to Alex, and act like a proper bride." Ava swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the wine glass so tightly her knuckles went white. "I'm trying," she whispered. But Eleanor leaned in closer, her breath brushing against Ava's face. "Trying. If your grandmother's nursing home loses its funding, Margaret will be out on the street and it'll be your fault. Do you want to see her look at you with disappointment, Ava?" Eleanor smiled, but it was a smile colder than ice. Ava stiffened, an image of her grandmother Margaret, with her silver hair and warm smile, flashing in her mind. She was the only one who loved Ava after her mother died, and the nursing home was Ava's second home. She couldn't let it fall apart. "I understand," Ava said, her voice small but determined. Eleanor nodded, turning away, leaving Ava with the feeling that the whole world was on her shoulders. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to move through the crowd, where Alex stood, surrounded by wealthy guests. He wore a black suit, sunglasses covering his eyes, holding a champagne glass but not drinking it. His assistant, Luke, stood beside him, whispering something, and Alex nodded, a faint smile on his lips. Ava stopped, her heart pounding. How could she play the role of Chloe, sharp, confident, when every step closer to Alex made her feel like she was about to be found out? Chloe. Alex's voice rang out, deep and smooth, as if he knew she was approaching. The crowd around him parted, leaving Ava standing awkwardly in front of him, like a bird trapped in a cage. You've been missing all evening. Are you that afraid of me? Ava startled, nearly spilling wine from her glass. No, not at all, she stammered, then quickly corrected her tone, trying to mimic Chloe's confidence. I was just greeting guests. Alex tilted his head, the smile on his lips deepening. Greeting guests? Your voice is shaking like you've just run a marathon. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them, making Ava feel the warmth emanating from him. You're not good at lying, Chloe. Those words felt like a stab, making Ava freeze. She opened her mouth but found no words. Luke, standing behind, cleared his throat, attempting to break the tension. Mr. Thornton, Mr. Edward would like to see you in the meeting room, he said, his voice calm. Alex nodded, but his gaze, or rather the direction of his sunglasses, remained fixed on Ava. We'll continue this conversation, Chloe, he said in a low voice, carrying an unpredictable tone. He turned, letting Luke guide him away, but before disappearing from sight, he glanced back. Don't wander too far. I don't like having to look for my wife. Ava stood there, her breath caught, feeling as if she had just escaped a trap, but only temporarily. She turned away, only to catch Chloe's gaze from afar. Her sister, in a pink dress, smirked, raising her glass as if to toast a victory. Ava looked away, her heart pounding. She needed air, needed to escape the room. She made her way through the crowd, heading toward the balcony, where the night breeze carried the scent of dry grass and jasmine. She leaned against the railing, taking deep breaths, trying to dispel the pressure that was suffocating her. But the image of her grandmother Margaret appeared again, sitting in the armchair at the nursing home, telling old stories with a warm voice. "You are my light, Ava," she once said. Now, that light was fading, and Ava had to play Chloe's role to keep it from extinguishing. Soft footsteps sounded behind her. Ava turned, startled to see Luke, Alex's assistant, standing there, scrutinizing her. "Are you okay, Ms. Sullivan?" he asked, his voice gentle but tinged with something sharp. I'm fine," Ava replied, but her voice faltered. She gripped the railing, trying to stay calm. "Just needed some air." Luke nodded but didn't leave. "Mr. Thornton asked me to escort you back to the reception. He cares about you." He paused, seeming to weigh his words. "More than I thought." Ava frowned, her heart racing. "Cares? What do you mean?" Luke smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "It's just, he notices the little things, like how you walk, how you speak. Different from Chloe." Those words felt like a punch to Ava's chest. She opened her mouth, but Luke had already turned, gesturing for her to follow. "Come on. Don't keep Mr. Thornton waiting." Ava followed, but each step felt heavier. When they returned to the party hall, Alex was there, standing next to his grandfather, Edward Thornton, a tall man with silver hair, his voice booming like thunder. "Chloe, come here," Mr. Edward commanded. Ava forced herself to move forward, but as she neared, Alex turned to her, his sunglasses hiding his eyes, yet his smile sent a shiver down her spine. "Chloe, tell me," Alex said, his voice deep. "What do you like about Los Angeles? The beach, the mountains, or places like nursing homes?" Ava froze, her wine glass almost slipping from her hand. Nursing homes? How did he know? She hurriedly smiled, but her voice trembled. I don't understand what you mean. Alex tilted his head, his smile deepening. Really? I've heard you care a lot about places like that. Tell me about it, Chloe. Ava's heart pounded, as if trying to break free from her chest. Was he testing her? Or did he really know something? The sound of pages turning was steady, like the slow heartbeat in the Hollywood Hills mansion's library. The soft light from the old bronze desk lamp cast a warm, golden glow over the oak bookshelves, enveloping the room. The scent of old paper and polished wood mingled, creating a serene space. But for Ava Sullivan, it felt like a glass cage. Beautiful, yet suffocating. She sat in an armchair, the novel Jane Eyre open in her hand, reading aloud softly but with a tremor, as if afraid to shatter the air. Opposite her sat Alexander Thornton, her newlywed husband, a blind millionaire CEO, sitting upright, sunglasses concealing his eyes, hands clasped tightly on his lap. He tilted his head, listening intently to every word Ava read, as if he were not only listening to the words but also to her breathing. The wedding party had been over for 2 days, but Alex's words still haunted Ava. You're not good at lying, Chloe. And Luke's words, his assistant. Mr. Thornton notices the smallest things. Those words were like stones weighing on her chest, making every moment with Alex a challenge. Ava paused her reading, fingers brushing the page, trying to regain her composure. She glanced at Alex, but his face was calm, betraying no emotion. You stopped, he said, his voice deep, smooth like velvet. What part is Jane Eyre at, Chloe? The name Chloe made Ava tense up. She swallowed dryly, forcing herself to smile. Jane just rejected St. John's proposal, she replied, her voice slightly faltering. She wants to live true to her heart. Alex smirked, a hard-to-read smile. True to her heart, he repeated as if savoring each word. Do you think Jane was right or wrong to do so? The question felt like a dagger, startling Ava. She gripped the book tightly, the paper crinkling under her fingers. I think she was right, she said in a small voice. Living true to oneself is the most important thing. Alex tilted his head, his smile deepening. Really? Not everyone has the courage to do that, Chloe. His words were like a trap, making Ava's heart race. Was he testing her, or was it just unintentional? She took a deep breath, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. Do you like Jane Eyre? She asked, trying to sound casual. I thought you might prefer more realistic books. Alex chuckled, the warm sound catching Ava by surprise. Realistic? I'm a CEO, Chloe, but that doesn't mean I don't dream. Jane Eyre reminds me that the heart can see things the eyes can't. He paused, his sunglasses facing her direction. Do you believe that? Ava froze, feeling as if he could see right through her, though his eyes were empty. She opened her mouth, but before she could reply, there was a knock. The library door opened and Luke entered, carrying a tray of tea. Mr. Thornton, your tea, he said, placing the tray on the table. Ava hastily stood up, trying to help, but her hands trembled, dropping Jane Eyre with a thud on the floor. She awkwardly bent down to pick it up, her face flushing. Oh, I'm sorry, she muttered, wishing she could disappear. Luke smiled, picking up the book and handing it back to her. It's okay, Miss Sullivan. You seem tense. He glanced at Alex, exchanging a secret look, even though Alex couldn't see it. She's just not used to her bride role yet, right, Chloe? Alex said with a teasing tone. Ava blushed, her heart racing. He called her Chloe again, but why did that name feel like he was actually calling her? Ava. Luke left, leaving Ava and Alex in heavy silence. She sat down, opening the book again. but her thoughts drifted to the nursing home where her grandmother Margaret was waiting. Yesterday, Ava had secretly called, hearing her grandmother's weak voice over the phone. "Are you well, my light?" Ava nearly cried, but only said, "I'm fine, Grandma. I won't let the nursing home fall. What are you thinking?" Alex's voice cut through, startling Ava. She looked up to see him tilt his head, as if he could hear her thoughts. Just thinking about family," she said, her voice trembling. "The people I want to protect." Alex nodded slowly, as if committing every word to memory. "Family," he repeated. "They can be the reason we do unexpected things, right?" Ava swallowed hard, feeling as though he was delving into her secrets. She quickly changed the subject. "Do you want me to continue reading?" she asked, her voice slightly high-pitched. "Read," Alex said, but there was something sharp in his voice. "But this time, read with your real voice. No need to pretend to be Chloe." His words were like a shock, freezing Ava. The book in her hand trembled, the pages rustling. Did he know? Or was it just a careless comment? She took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice steady. I don't understand what you mean." Alex smiled, his smile mysterious like the night. "Really? Your voice when you read the book. It sounded different from Chloe's voice at dinner the other night. Warmer. More genuine." Ava's heart pounded as if it wanted to burst from her chest. She wanted to run, but her grandmother Margaret's image appeared, reminding her of the nursing home. She couldn't give up. She couldn't reveal the truth. The phone rang, interrupting the tense atmosphere. Luke reappeared, his voice urgent. "Mr. Thornton, Mr. Edward needs to see you immediately. There's an issue with the board of directors." Alex nodded, standing up, supporting himself with a cane. But before leaving, he turned to Ava. "We'll continue our conversation, Chloe," he said, his voice deep. "And I hope next time, you'll tell me about yourself." Ava sat there, the book in her hand as heavy as lead, her breath caught. Was he playing a dangerous game, or did he really know who she was? The night wind blew through the balcony of the Hollywood Hills mansion, carrying the scent of jasmine and dry grass, ruffling Ava Sullivan's untamed hair. She leaned against the cold stone railing, clutching a small recorder tightly, her voice trembling as she read a passage from Jane Eyre. "I am not a bird, and no net ensnares me," she whispered, her voice fluctuating like sharing a secret. The faint moonlight highlighted her face, emphasizing her anxious eyes. It had been a week since the wedding, and the words of Alexander Thornton, her newlywed husband, the blind millionaire CEO, still echoed in her mind. "Read in your true voice." That statement, along with the scrutinizing gaze of Assistant Luke, made Ava feel as though she was walking a tightrope. One misstep, and she'd fall into the abyss. She wasn't sure how much Alex suspected, but every time he called her Chloe, her heart clenched, strangled by her own secret. Ava began recording audiobooks at the mansion, inspired by the sessions where she read Jane Eyre to Alex. She wanted to create a collection for the blind, so people like her grandmother Margaret in the nursing home could listen and experience the world through sound. She worked secretly at night, when the mansion was silent, fearing that Alex or Luke might hear. She wasn't ready to share this dream, worried they would mock her, or worse, question her identity. She pressed the record button, her voice gentle. Jane walked across the fields, the wind rustling through her dress, telling her an old story. But she paused, startled when her phone vibrated in her pocket. She quickly turned off the recorder, her heart pounding. The screen lit up, displaying the name Chloe. Ava took a deep breath, answered, her voice small. "Chloe, what's going on so late?" Chloe's voice came through sharp as a knife. "Don't play dumb, Ava. Do you think you can be the bride forever?" I need you to gather information from Alex's company. Contracts, plans, anything. Our family needs it to maintain our standing. Don't make me repeat myself." Ava gripped the railing, recalling her stepmother Eleanor's words before the wedding. "If you refuse, your grandmother's nursing home will fall apart. Grandma Margaret will be on the street, and it will be your fault." The image of her grandmother, her silver hair, weak smile, appeared, making Ava swallow hard. "I won't betray Alex," she said, her voice small but firm. "He doesn't deserve that." Chloe laughed over the phone, an edgy sound like broken glass. "Betray? Do you think Alex cares about you? He's a CEO, Ava, not a character in your story. Do what I tell you, or your grandmother will pay the price." The threat cut like a knife, forcing Ava to step back, her back hitting the cold railing. She wanted to resist, but the image of Grandma Margaret, her frail hands clasping Ava's, kept her silent. Chloe hung up, leaving Ava with the night wind and a heavy heart. She took out the recorder, intending to continue, but a small sound interrupted. The creak of wood from the corner of the balcony. Ava turned, heart pounding, but saw no one. She took a deep breath, telling herself it was just the wind, but unease clung to her like a shadow. The next morning, Ava brought a tray of tea into the library, where Alex usually sat. He was there, sunglasses covering his eyes, his hands running over a braille book. She placed the tray down, but her hands were trembling, spilling a little tea on the table. "Oh, I'm sorry," she apologized, hurriedly grabbing a cloth, her voice small like she wanted to sink into the floor. Alex chuckled, a deep, warm sound startling Ava. "You always spill something when you're near me," he said, his tone teasing. "Or am I making you nervous, Chloe?" Ava blushed, hurriedly wiping the table, but her hands fumbled, dropping the spoon with a clatter on the floor. She crouched to pick it up, her face hot, muttering, "Why do I keep making things worse like this?" "It's not worse," Alex said, his voice gentle. "It makes me feel more real." He tilted his head, as if listening to every sound she made. "Have you ever thought of doing something for others, Chloe? Like helping them hear the world?" The question froze Ava. How did he know about her dream of making audiobooks? She swallowed, trying to keep her voice calm. "What do you mean?" Alex smiled, his hand gliding over the braille book. "I heard you last night on the balcony. Your voice when you read. It was warmer, as if you were telling your own story." Ava's heart pounded, as if trying to burst out of her chest. Had he heard her recording? She opened her mouth, but a knock on the door interrupted. Luke entered, his voice urgent. "Mr. Thornton, Mr. Edward needs to see you immediately. There's an email from Damien, your cousin, regarding a suspicious contract." Alex nodded, standing up, supporting himself with a cane. But before leaving, he turned to Ava. "You should keep reading, Chloe," he said, his voice deep. "And next time, read in your true voice." Ava stood there, clutching the cloth tightly, her breath caught. He had heard her, but how much did he know about her secret? The sound of water trickling from the fountain in the garden of a Hollywood Hills mansion blended with the night breeze carrying a whiff of roses. The silver moonlight shone through the palm leaves, painting patches of light and shadow on the stone pathway. Ava Sullivan walked slowly, her hands clasped tightly, trying to keep her breath steady while walking alongside Alexander Thornton. He wore a white shirt, sunglasses covering his eyes, and a cane in hand, yet his steps were steady, as if he knew each stone in the garden by heart. Alex's words from last night, "Read with your true voice," still echoed in Ava's mind like an unsolvable riddle. He had heard her recording the audiobook on the balcony, but how much did he know? That question, along with Chloe's threat over the phone, "Do what I say, or your grandma will pay the price," made Ava feel as if she were walking on thin ice, ready to crack at any moment. "You're very quiet, Chloe," Alex's voice broke through her thoughts, deep and smooth. Afraid of me or afraid of the dark? Ava was startled, nearly tripping over a protruding stone. She quickly regained her balance, her face flushing as she murmured, "I'm just admiring the flowers." Alex chuckled, the warm sound making Ava's heart race. "Admiring the flowers? Then tell me, Chloe, how do the roses look tonight?" She took a deep breath, looking at the deep red roses under the moonlight. "They are vividly red, like blood, yet soft, like velvet. Each petal curves up, as if whispering to the wind. And the scent, sweet, but with a hint of sadness." She stopped, realizing she had spoken too much, more like a writer than the haughty Chloe. Alex tilted his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You describe them as if the roses are a story, not like the Chloe I knew." That comment made Ava freeze, her hand gripping her dress. Was he testing her again? She hurried to change the topic. "Do you like strolling like this? I thought you preferred staying indoors." "Indoors?" Alex repeated, a teasing tone in his voice. "I'm a CEO, Chloe, not a vampire. I like fresh air, especially with a good storyteller like you." Ava blushed, her heart pounding. She led him onward, but as they neared the fountain, she tripped over a small branch, almost falling. "Oh!" she exclaimed, embarrassed. Alex reached out quickly, catching her wrist to keep her steady. She stiffened, looking at his hand. How did he react so fast? Wasn't he blind? "Thank you," she murmured, her voice trembling. "I didn't see the branch. I heard you stumble," Alex said, his voice calm, though his smile held a mysterious edge. "You should be careful, Chloe. Not everyone can save you." Ava swallowed hard, feeling as though he could see right through her, despite his eyes being hidden by sunglasses. She pulled her hand back, trying to keep her voice steady. "You hear well?" Alex smiled, guiding her to a stone bench near the fountain. "Sit," he said gently. "Tell me about yourself, Chloe. Not roses, not books, just you." That question was like a stab, causing Ava to freeze. She sat down, her hands tightly clasped, recalling her stepmother Eleanor's words. "Grandma Margaret will end up on the streets, and it will be your fault." She took a deep breath, her voice small. I like helping others. Like at the nursing home where people need to be heard." Alex nodded slowly, as if memorizing every word. "The nursing home," he repeated. "You mentioned it before. Who there is important to you?" Ava's heart raced. Her grandma Margaret's weak smile and frail hands flashed in her mind. She wanted to tell him everything, but was afraid of exposing her identity. "Just the people I care about," she said, her voice trembling. Alex tilted his head, his smile deepening. "Care about? That makes you different from the Chloe I knew." Those words made Ava draw back, her back touching the cold stone bench. How did he know? Or was it just a coincidence? Before she could respond, footsteps echoed. Luke appeared, his voice urgent. "Mr. Thornton, Mr. Edward just got a message. Damien sent another email, requesting an urgent board meeting. It looks like he's up to something." Alex nodded, standing up, his hand on the cane. But before leaving, he turned to Ava. "You should tell me more, Chloe," he said, his voice deep. "About the people you love, and the secrets you keep." Ava sat there, her hands clutching her dress, her breath caught. He suspected her. But what game was he playing with her secrets? The melancholic notes of jazz music played in the luxurious restaurant in the heart of Los Angeles, blending with the clinking of wine glasses and whispered conversations of wealthy patrons. Yellow light from crystal chandeliers shone down on the tables, draped in white silk, reflecting off Ava Sullivan's deep blue evening gown. She sat across from Alexander Thornton, her newlywed husband, a blind millionaire CEO, sipping her wine glass lightly, trying to keep her smile natural. The red wine and polished wood scent filled the room. But for Ava, the atmosphere was heavy like an impending storm. It had been 2 weeks since the night in the garden when Alex asked her about the people she loved, and his voice, "You should tell me more, Chloe," still echoed in her mind like a warning. He had heard her audiobook recordings, recognized her voice as warmer than the real Chloe, and worse, caught her when she almost tripped with a reaction too fast for a blind man. Ava started to suspect, albeit fleetingly, that Alex wasn't entirely blind as he seemed. But every time she intended to ask, Assistant Luke would appear, misdirecting with plausible explanations. Now, sitting in the restaurant, Ava had gradually familiarized herself with playing Chloe's role. She learned to speak more confidently, mimicking her sister's haughty smile while still maintaining a bit of her own warmth. She took a deep breath, looking at Alex, sunglasses obscuring his eyes, the black suit fitting perfectly, with his usual faint smile. "Do you come here often, Alex?" she asked, her voice light but purposefully natural, as Chloe would. "This restaurant is excessively luxurious." Alex laughed, the warm sound drawing the attention of a few nearby patrons. "Excessively luxurious. I thought you liked extravagance, Chloe," he said, teasing. "Or do you prefer simpler places, like the nursing home?" The question made Ava freeze, her wine glass trembling slightly in her hand. He mentioned the nursing home again, where Grandma Margaret was living. She smiled, quickly adapting. "Nursing home? I might visit out of kindness, but I prefer places that are more vibrant," she said, her voice haughty like Chloe, but her eyes veiled, concealing the real motive about her grandma. Alex tilted his head, his smile deepening. "Vibrant? I think you'd do well anywhere," he said, his hand gliding along the rim of his wine glass. "You have a voice that makes people want to listen, like when you read Jane Eyre." It was very real. Ava's heart pounded. He brought up the audiobook again. She wanted to change the subject, but a sharp voice rang out from behind. "Chloe, what a surprise to see you here." Ava turned, her heart skipping a beat. Chloe Sullivan stood there, a striking red dress clinging to her, her blonde hair sparkling under the light. She smiled, but her gaze was as sharp as a blade. Ava tightened her grip on the wine glass, trying to stay calm. Alex inclined his head, his sunglasses facing the source of the voice, but said nothing. "Alex, this is my sister, Lily," Ava said quickly, her voice slightly shaky but attempting naturalness, improvising to hide the truth. "She's just visiting." Chloe smirked, taking the empty seat beside Ava without waiting for an invitation. "Yes, just visiting," she said, her voice dripping with sweet deceit. Then she leaned in, whispering just loud enough for Ava to hear. "Are you doing well, Chloe? Don't let the secret slip, or Grandma won't be happy." Ava froze, her hand clenching the wine glass until her knuckles turned white. The image of Grandma Margaret, her silver hair, her weak smile, appeared, making Ava swallow hard. She smiled, skillfully adapting. "Lily, you always make everything more dramatic than it needs to be," she said, her voice haughty like the real Chloe, her gaze firm on Chloe. Chloe smirked, a flash of anger in her eyes. "I just wanted to say hi, Chloe," she said, her voice sweet yet cutting. "But you should be careful. Not everyone believes you are you." She stood up, leaving with a decisive pivot, leaving Ava's breath caught. Alex turned to Ava, a faint smile on his lips. "Your family seems complicated, Chloe," he said, his voice deep. "Your sister likes to stir up trouble, doesn't she?" Ava took a deep breath, maintaining Chloe's attitude. "Just family matters. she said, her voice light yet sharp. I'm used to it, Alex. You don't need to worry. He tilted his head, as if listening to every sound from her. Good, he said. Because I want to hear your real story, Chloe. Soon. The atmosphere was interrupted when a man approached. Damien Thornton, Alex's cousin, with a gray suit and a smooth smile. Alex, Chloe, it's great to see you both, Damien said, his tone slick but his gaze sharp as it swept over Ava. I just emailed Mr. Edward. There are some issues with the new contract. We should discuss it soon. Alex nodded, yet his grip on the cane tightened, as if contemplating. Thank you, Damien, he said, his voice calm. But tonight I want to focus on my wife. Damien smiled, but Ava noticed his gaze follow Chloe as she left, as if exchanging a secret signal. She swallowed hard, her heart racing. What was Damien plotting? And was Chloe involved? As Damien left, Alex turned to Ava. You should tell me more, Chloe, he said, his voice deep. About the people you love, and the secrets you keep. Ava sat there, her hands trembling under the table, her breath caught. Chloe had confronted her, Damien was scheming, and Alex was playing a dangerous game. But how much did he know about her secrets? The sound of a door slamming echoed through the Sullivan house, like the blow of a hammer hitting the suffocating air. Dim light from the old chandelier shone down on the polished wooden staircase, reflecting off Eleanor Sullivan's black silk dress. Her strong perfume overwhelmed the room, making Ava Sullivan feel strangled. She stood in the middle of the living room, clutching the audiobook recording, her heart pounding after the confrontation with Chloe the night before. Alex Thornton's words, "You should tell me more, Chloe, about the people you love, and the secrets you keep," still swirled in her mind, like an unsolvable riddle. Worse, the secretive glances between Chloe and Damien Thornton at the restaurant made Ava suspect they were plotting something bigger. She came here, to her stepmother Eleanor and Chloe's house, to confront them. But now, standing in front of Eleanor's cold gaze, she felt like prey inside a cage. "Ava," Eleanor's voice cut through, cold as ice. "If you don't get information from Alexander's company, there will be consequences." Ava gulped. The image of her grandmother, silver hair, a weak smile, appeared, tightening her heart. "I won't betray Alex," she said, her voice small but firm, adapting with newfound courage. "He doesn't deserve to be treated like a pawn." Chloe, leaning against the doorframe, laughed sharply. "A pawn? You think Alex cares about you, Ava?" she said, voice dripping with disdain. "He's a CEO, not a knight from your books. Get that information, or I'll have Eleanor cut funding today." Ava clutched the recording, her fingers white. She took a deep breath, her gaze more determined than ever. "I won't do it, Chloe," she said clearly. "Grandma will understand. And I'll find another way to save the retirement home." Eleanor tilted her head, her gaze as sharp as daggers. "Another way? You're just a useless child, Ava," she said, her voice cold. "Do you think you can defy us? If you don't listen, Grandma Margaret will pay first. Don't provoke me." The threat was like a knife, causing Ava to step back, her back hitting the sofa. She wanted to scream, but the image of her grandma, frail hands holding hers, kept her silent. She tightened her grip on the recording, the only thing reminding her of the dream for audiobooks, of the reason she still stood strong in Chloe's role. "You have 1 week," Eleanor said, voice low but piercing. "Get the information from Alex, or I'll call the nursing home immediately." She turned, leaving Ava with Chloe, her gaze glimmering like a predator. "You should listen to Mom," Chloe said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Because if you fail, I'll make sure Alex knows you're not me." She stepped closer, enough for Ava to feel her breath. "And then, do you think he'll forgive?" Ava stiffened, But this time she did not tremble. She looked directly at Chloe, adapting with newfound resolve. "Maybe he won't forgive," she said, voice small but strong. "But I'd rather lose everything than betray him." Chloe smirked, her gaze flashing with anger. "You'll regret it," she said, then turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Ava standing in the living room, her breath catching. When Ava returned to the Hollywood Hills mansion, it had started raining. She stepped into the library, drenched, the recording rumpled in her coat pocket. She placed it on the table, but her hand shook, dropping the USB drive with a clang. She knelt to pick it up, muttering, "Why do I keep messing things up like this?" Footsteps echoed. Ava looked up, seeing Alex at the door, sunglasses covering his eyes, cane in hand. "Where have you been all day, Chloe?" he asked, voice low with a playful tone. "Or are you hiding from me?" Ava blushed, hurriedly picking up the USB, her heart racing. Just visiting the family," she said lightly, adapting skillfully. "Family affairs, you know. Sometimes quite complicated." Alex smiled, stepping closer. "Complicated? I understand," he said warmly yet keenly. "Family can make you do unexpected things, like keeping secrets." Those words froze Ava. She clenched the USB, trying to keep her voice natural. "Secrets? What are you talking about, Alex?" she asked, adopting Chloe's confident tone. He tilted his head, his smile deepening. "I heard you last night, Chloe," he said. "On the balcony, when you were reading. You're doing something for someone else, aren't you?" Ava's heart pounded, as if trying to break free from her chest. He was talking about the audiobooks again. She smiled, adapting swiftly. "Just a little hobby," she said lightly. "Nothing big, Alex." He nodded, but before leaving he paused. "You should share it with me, Chloe," he said lowly, "because I want to know your real story and the secrets you're keeping." Ava stood there, clutching the USB, her breath catching. She had confronted her family, but Alex and his doubts were pushing her to the edge. How much does he know about her? The sound of the recording machine whirred steadily in the small recording studio of the Hollywood Hills mansion, blending with the soft light from a brass desk lamp. The scent of old paper and ink lingered in the air, creating a silent yet oppressive atmosphere. Ava Sullivan sat before the microphone, clutching the audiobook manuscript tightly, her voice trembling as she read a passage from Jane Eyre. "I stood there, in the wild field, unafraid, because my heart was the only light," she whispered, her voice rising and falling as if telling her own story. It had been a month since the confrontation with Chloe at the restaurant, and Alexander Thornton's words, "You should tell me more, Chloe, about the people you love and the secrets you keep," still haunted her. Chloe and stepmother Eleanor constantly threatened to cut the funding for Grandma Margaret's nursing home if she didn't get information from Alex's company. But Ava, with her kind heart, decided not to betray him. She loved Alex, not just because he was good, but because of how he listened to her, the way he smiled at her clumsiness, and how he made her feel seen, even though he was blind. Ava stopped the recording, took a deep breath, reminiscing about Grandma Margaret, the silver hair, the faint smile as she listened to her stories over the phone. She couldn't let Grandma lose the nursing home, but she also couldn't betray Alex. She had secretly contacted old sponsors, hoping to find new funding to save the home, working quietly at night without letting Alex or Luke know. A light knock on the door startled Ava. She quickly turned off the machine, dropping a pen on the floor with a clang. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice trembling, hurriedly picking up the pen, mumbling clumsily. "Why do I keep dropping things like this? What are you doing in here, Chloe?" Alex's voice resonated, deep and smooth like velvet. He stood at the doorway, with sunglasses over his eyes, using a cane, but his steps were firm, as though he knew the room by heart. Ava blushed, her heart beating wildly. "I was just arranging paperwork," she said, improvising skillfully, her voice light but trying to sound as proud as Chloe. "What are you doing in here?" "I thought you were in a meeting with Mr. Edward." Alex smiled, stepping closer, his cane lightly tapping on the wooden floor. "Meeting room? I needed air more," he said, his voice teasing. "And I could hear you. Your voice. You were reading something again, weren't you?" Ava froze, gripping the manuscript. Did he hear her recording? She inhaled deeply, deciding to take a risk, improvising with sincerity. "All right," she said, her voice steady. "This is an audiobook recording. I wanted to do something for the blind, to let them feel the world through sound." Alex was silent, his hand gliding over the cane, as if contemplating. "An audiobook?" he repeated, his voice deep. "For people like me?" Ava nodded, then realized he couldn't see, quickly said, "Yes. I thought it's meaningful." He smiled for the first time without a mysterious look. "Meaningful," he said, his voice strangely warm. "You surprise me, Chloe. Not many people think of that." Ava's heart pounded, but this time not out of fear. She felt the sincerity in his voice, and it made her want to tell the truth. She took a deep breath, her voice small. "Alex, She stopped, the manuscript in her hand trembling. She wanted to confess she was Ava, but the fear of losing the nursing home kept her silent. "What were you going to say?" Alex asked, his voice deep, stepping closer. He reached out, touching her hand, and the touch was like an electric shock. "You don't need to hide from me, Chloe. I have seen your heart, even without eyes." Ava swallowed hard, her eyes stinging. Did he know? Or was it just an accidental remark? She smiled, improvising skillfully. "You're too romantic, Alex," she said, her voice light. "I just want to do something good. It's nothing big." He tilted his head, his smile deeper. "Nothing big? I think it's bigger than you admit," he said, his voice deep. "But I will wait. Wait for you to tell me your real story." A knock interrupted. Luke entered, his voice urgent. "Mr. Thornton, Mr. Edward needs you immediately. Damien just sent a document, indicating a potential internal information leak." Alex nodded, but before leaving he turned to Ava. "Bring me that recording to listen, Chloe," he said, his voice deep. "And your real story. I'm waiting." Ava stood there, clutching the manuscript, her breath catching. She hadn't betrayed Alex, but what was he waiting for? And was her plan to save the nursing home enough to escape the secrets weighing down on her? Soft footsteps echoed on the red carpet in the luxurious hotel lobby in New York, mingling with the soft chandelier lights falling on the marble floor. The scent of coffee lingered in the air, bringing a touch of warmth to the lavish space. Ava Sullivan stepped out from a small meeting room, her white sweater and simple gray skirt hugging her slender figure, radiating her innate gracefulness. She had just concluded a meeting with Mrs. Camilla, a philanthropist from Dubai, who had known her from her volunteering at the nursing home. Ava had presented the audiobook project and the difficulties faced by the home, and Mrs. Camilla promised to consider sponsoring it. But Ava's heart was still heavy. Alexander Thornton's words in the recording studio, "I have seen your heart, even without eyes," kept spinning in her head, as if inviting her to confess the truth. She loved Alex, loved how he listened to her, loved the way he smiled when she was clumsy, but she still hid her true identity. Ava, not Chloe. She feared losing him, feared losing her grandmother Margaret's nursing home. And now, she was risking everything to find a new donor, hoping to escape the pressure from her stepmother Eleanor and Chloe. Ava took a deep breath as she moved toward the exit, clutching the folder on the nursing home. But a familiar figure made her freeze. Chloe Sullivan, in a red dress, her golden hair, was draped around Damien Thornton, Alex's cousin, in the lobby corner. They laughed, their hands intertwined, their eyes sparkling as if sharing a secret. Ava retreated into the shadows, her heart pounding, trying to eavesdrop. "Soon, Damien," Chloe's voice murmured, sweet yet sharp. "We'll own it all. Our own empire." Damien chuckled, his voice smooth. "As long as Ava continues to pretend to be you, we'll have everything," he said, gently stroking Chloe's hand. "Alex's company will be ours." Ava stood frozen, her hand shaking the folder, nearly dropping it. Chloe and Damien conspiring to manipulate Thornton Corporation. She wanted to flee, but her feet felt glued to the ground. She inhaled deeply, recalling her grandmother Margaret, the faint smile, frail hands. She couldn't let Chloe and Damien win. She had to tell Alex the truth, even if it meant losing everything. She left the lobby, her heart pounding, and returned to the Hollywood Hills mansion. Alex was in the library, sunglasses shielding his eyes, his hand gliding over a braille book. She took a deep breath and approached him, her voice trembling. "Alex, I need to tell you," she said, her voice small but firm. He tilted his head, a faint smile. "Tell me what, Chloe?" he asked, his voice deep. "Your true story?" Ava swallowed hard, her eyes stinging. "I'm not Chloe," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm Ava, Chloe's sister. They forced me to pretend to be her to save my grandmother's nursing home. But I haven't betrayed you. And now, I found out Chloe and Damien are scheming to manipulate your company." Alex remained silent, gripping his cane tightly. Then he took off his sunglasses, revealing eyes both clouded and piercing. "Ava," he said, his voice deep, full of emotion. "I've been waiting for this moment. I knew you weren't Chloe, from your voice, from your heart. And I've loved you for it." Ava froze, tears streaming. "How did you know?" she asked, her voice trembling. "And your eyes?" Alex smiled, his eyes glimmering. "I'm undergoing treatment. My vision has recovered 70%, he said. "I've seen you, Ava. Not just with my eyes, but with my heart. But I need to know if you'll choose truth or continue to pretend." Ava cried, laughing through tears, holding his hand. "I choose you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I love you, Alex." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, his voice deep. "I love you too, Ava," he said. "But we must keep the secret. I need you to pretend to be Chloe a little longer, to trap Damien and Chloe. They must not know I'm regaining my sight." Ava nodded, tears still falling, but this time from happiness. She had confessed, and he still chose her. But where will this new secret lead them? The gentle light from the hospital recovery room window in Los Angeles streamed through the thin curtains, casting faint streaks across the white-tiled floor. The soft, rhythmic hum of machinery blended with the faint scent of antiseptics in the air. Ava Sullivan sat beside the bed in a simple white sweater, hands clasped tightly, eyes red from a sleepless night. In front of her, Alexander Thornton lay still, his eyes bandaged, waiting for the final surgery to fully restore his vision. It had been a month since Ava confessed she was Ava, not Chloe, and Alex revealed he'd seen her through his heart, even though his vision only recovered 70%. His words, "I need you to pretend to be Chloe a while longer, to trap Damien and Chloe," still echoed in her mind. Ava agreed to continue the act, keep the secret that Alex could see again, to trap Chloe and Damien Thornton, who were scheming to manipulate the Thornton Corporation. She feared they would find out, but her heart felt light knowing Alex loved her, for who she truly was. Ava took a deep breath, recalling her grandmother Margaret, the weak smile, frail hands. She had contacted benefactor Camilla, who promised to sponsor the nursing home, easing the pressure from stepmother Eleanor and Chloe. Now, she replaced assistant Luke to take care of Alex in the hospital, allowing Luke to investigate Damien according to Alex's plan. "You're so quiet, Chloe." Alex's voice rang out, deep and smooth, cutting through her thoughts. He lay there with his eyes bandaged, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Afraid of what I might see?" Ava was startled, smiled, and responded deftly like Chloe. "Afraid? I'm only worried you'll see I'm not pretty enough in this light," she said with a proud yet warm tone. Alex chuckled, the deep sound making the nurse glance over. "Not pretty enough? I doubt that," he teased. "But you know what, Ava? I have seen you, and I love you." Ava blushed, her heart pounding. She took his hand, speaking softly. "I love you too," she whispered, eyes moist. A knock at the door interrupted them. The doctor entered, speaking in a steady voice. "Mr. Thornton, we are ready to remove the bandages. Your vision may fully restore after this surgery." Ava squeezed Alex's hand, her heart racing. She stayed by him while Luke sent a message. "Found evidence. Damien transferred money to a shell company in Cayman. Chloe signed a fake contract." Ava swallowed hard, reading the message to Alex. He nodded, his voice deep. "Good," he said. "They think I'm still blind, but we'll turn the tables at the shareholder meeting." The doctor removed the bandages and Alex opened his eyes. Light touched his pupils, making him blink slightly. He looked straight at Ava, his gaze sharp yet warm. "Ava," he said, his voice deep. "You're more beautiful than I imagined." Ava cried, laughed, hugged him. "You can see," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You can see." Alex pulled her into his arms, kissed her forehead, voice deep. "I've seen you a long time ago, Ava," he said, "and I will protect you." She held his hand tightly, tears rolling down, but this time out of happiness. She took a deep breath, voice low. "What will we do about Damien and Chloe?" she asked, her voice trembling but resolute. Alex smiled, his eyes bright. "We'll let them think they've won," he said. "Luke has the evidence, illegal transactions, fake contracts. Damien thinks he's manipulating the board, but I've emailed Mr. Edward. They won't see it coming." Ava froze, her breath catching, recalling the secret glances shared between Chloe and Damien at the New York hotel. "They're closely allied," she said softly. Damien spoke of a separate empire. Chloe signed fake contracts to transfer money. Alex nodded, squeezing her hand. "I know," he said, "but they don't know we have each other. You will continue to pretend to be Chloe, just once more, at the shareholder meeting." Ava nodded, but her heart beat fast. She looked at Alex, his eyes shining in the soft light. "I will do it," she said, voice firm. "For you. For us." He pulled her into his embrace, kissed her gently on the lips, a sweet yet intense kiss. "Thank you, Ava," he whispered. "You are my light." Ava cried, laughed, and held him tightly. But as they left the hospital, one question churned in her mind. When Damien and Chloe are exposed at the shareholder meeting, how will they retaliate? The whispers of shareholders resonated in the luxurious conference room in Los Angeles, mingling with the light streaming through the large windows that illuminated the long wooden table. The smell of coffee and documents filled the air, creating a tense atmosphere. Ava Sullivan sat next to Alexander Thornton, her simple blue blazer fitting snugly, hands clasped tightly under the table, trying to maintain a haughty smile like Chloe Sullivan. Alex sat upright, sunglasses covering his eyes, leaning on a cane, pretending to still be blind to keep his secret from the board. It had been a week since Alex fully regained his vision, and his words, "We will turn the tables at the shareholder meeting," still echoed in Ava's mind. They had planned to trap Damien Thornton and Chloe, who were scheming to manipulate the Thornton Corporation through illegal transfers and fake contracts. Ava continued to play the role of Chloe, her heart pounding, scared yet determined for her love for Alex and her grandmother Margaret. Damien stood at the head of the table, his voice smooth. "Ladies and gentlemen, I propose a new contract with international partners," he said, his smile sleek. "It will elevate the Thornton Corporation to new heights." Chloe, sitting at the end of the table in a stunning red dress, smirked, her eyes gleaming triumphantly. Ava swallowed hard, recalling the moment at the New York hotel when Chloe and Damien whispered about their private empire. She squeezed Alex's hand under the table, and he responded with a gentle squeeze, reassuring her. Mr. Edward Thornton, Alex's grandfather, sat at the head of the table, his voice booming. "Damien, this contract seems unusual," he said, his gaze sharp. "We need to scrutinize it." Damien chuckled confidently. "Unusual? Sir, this is a golden opportunity," he said. "Alex agrees, right?" Alex tilted his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I need more information, Damien," he said, his voice deep yet sharp. "Like the source of the funds in the contract." Damien stiffened, his smile vanishing. Chloe frowned, her eyes flicking to Ava, as if suspicious. Ava smiled, responding cleverly as Chloe would. "I think Alex is right," she said, her voice haughty. "We should be careful, Damien." The tension in the air tightened like a string. Damien clenched his documents, his voice harsh. "Careful? You don't understand business, Chloe," he said, his gaze icy. Alex laughed, the warm, deep sound silencing the room. "She knows more than you think," he said, his voice teasing. Then he stood up, removed his sunglasses, revealing sharp eyes. "And so do I." The room gasped, shareholders whispering. Damien froze, his face pale. Chloe stood up abruptly, her red dress shaking. You can see," she stammered, her voice trembling. Alex looked Damien in the eye, his gaze like a dagger. "I see everything, Damien," he said. "Your transfers to a shell company in Cayman, the fake contracts Chloe signed, your scheme to manipulate the Thornton Corporation." Mr. Edwards stood up, his voice booming. "Damien, you're finished," he said. "I have evidence from Luke, emails, recordings, bank accounts. The police are waiting outside." Heavy footsteps echoed. The police entered, handcuffing Damien. He struggled, shouting, "Alex, you can't do this." Chloe backed away, her face pale but her eyes still flashed with anger. Ava stood up, her heart pounding. "I'm not Chloe," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm Ava. I pretended to be Chloe to save my grandmother's nursing home. But I never betrayed Alex." The room fell silent. Alex turned to her, his gaze warm. "I know, Ava," he said, his voice deep. "And I love you for it." Mr. Edward nodded, his gaze softening. "Young lady, you did the right thing," he said. "The Thornton Corporation owes you." Ava swallowed hard, tears rolling down her cheeks. But as the police led Damien and Chloe away, one question lingered in her mind. They had been exposed, but how long would her and Alex's happiness last? The cheerful reading of children echoed in the charitable center in Oregon, blending with the gentle sunlight streaming through windows, painting warm beams across the wooden floor. The scent of lavender wafted through the air, bringing a sense of peace. Ava Sullivan stood in the room, a simple white sweater fitting snugly, holding a microphone, her voice melodic as she read the final segment of the audiobook collection. And she walked on, unafraid, for her heart was the light that led the way. She said, her eyes sparkling as if telling her own story. It had been 6 months since the shareholder meeting, when Alexander Thornton stood up, removed his sunglasses, and unveiled Damien Thornton's scheme. Damien, the mastermind behind the illegal transfers and fake contracts, was arrested by the police, facing charges of financial fraud. Chloe Sullivan, though involved in pressuring Ava for information, did not directly commit any illegal acts. Facing pressure from the Thornton family and feeling remorseful, she chose to do charitable work to atone, hoping to find herself again. After everything, Ava and Alex registered their marriage under her real name, Ava Sullivan, in a simple ceremony by the Oregon Lake, with her grandmother Margaret smiling from the front row. Now, they run this charitable center, where Ava launched the audiobook collection for the blind, sharing stories with people like her grandmother. She took a deep breath, looking at grandmother Margaret sitting in the front row, her silver hair shining under the sun, her smile weak but radiant. "You are my light, Ava," her grandmother once said, and now Ava felt that light spread throughout the room. Alex stood beside her, wearing a deep blue suit, his gaze sharp but warm. He held her hand, whispering, "You did well, Ava." She smiled, her eyes misty. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me, even when I was Chloe." He laughed, the warm sound drawing glances. "I saw you from the start, Ava," he said, his voice teasing. "Even when you dropped countless spoons." Ava blushed, remembering her clumsy moments in the hospital, dropping her phone, mumbling, "Why do I always mess everything up?" She laughed lightly. "Are you still teasing me about that?" "Always," Alex said, his eyes glinting. He stepped onto the podium, holding a microphone, his voice melodic. "I used to think light was just what the eyes could see," he said, looking at Ava. "But Ava showed me true light, in the heart, in stories, and in love." The room burst into applause, the sound like roaring waves. Grandmother Margaret wiped her tears, holding Ava's hand, her voice weak. "You make me proud, my light," she said, making Ava cry and laugh simultaneously. A gentle footstep echoed. Ava looked up, seeing Chloe standing at the corner of the room, in a simple gray dress, her gaze softer than before. She approached, her voice small. "Ava, I'm sorry," Chloe said, her voice trembling. "I was wrong to pressure you. I'm trying to make amends, here, with charitable work." Ava swallowed hard, her eyes misty. She smiled, lightly squeezing Chloe's hand. "Thank you, Chloe," she said, her voice sincere. "I hope you find your own light." Chloe nodded, her eyes glinting, then turned away, a silent promise. Ava turned to Alex, holding the audiobook manuscript, her voice wavering. "Can you read the opening?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. Alex smiled, opening the manuscript, but the ink smeared on his hand. "Did you get ink on the paper again, Ava?" he said, his voice teasing, holding up his ink-stained hand, making the room burst into laughter. Ava blushed, mumbling, "Why do I always mess everything up?" He laughed, pulling her into a hug. "Because you're Ava," he whispered, his voice deep. "And I love you for it." She held his hand, reading the ending of the audiobook, her voice melodic. "You are my light," she said, looking at Alex and grandmother Margaret, tears streaming down her face. The room fell silent, then erupted into applause, illuminating their happiness. Ava and Alex's journey closed, illuminating faith in love and truth. If the story made you smile or moved you, leave your thoughts, like, share, and subscribe to True Millionaire Moments. Share the moment that made you believe in love. Thank you for accompanying the channel. Each viewer is a torch illuminating faith and spreading love. Thank you.